So, without further ado, I would like to welcome you all to the DAR Museum Online. I am Sarah Kerspel, so today is the day of Sarah's, and I am the coordinator of museum engagement and outreach here for the museum. Today, we're going to hear from Sarah Johnson and as part of our monthly Tuesday Talk lecture, and it is presented the second Tuesday of the month, and it highlights topics related to the DAR Museum's collections, from decorative arts to American social history and best practices in object preservation. For a full list of our upcoming lectures and programs, please visit our website, which is www.dar.org/museum, or you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We have family programs, Girl Scout programs, symposium, exhibition tours, evening events, and more. Coming up this week, we have a family activity making fabric flowers on the 13th. And also on the 13th, we are hosting an unfinished objects craft circle, abbreviated UFOs, from 3 to 4:30. And we are on the 20th of July, because it's the month of July, we have a crystal bowl sound bath as well in the O'Byrne Gallery. Our next virtual program is going to be a hybrid talk on August 13th with curator Alden O'Brien. She's our curator of costumes and textiles, and she's the curator of the Sewn in America exhibition. So last in March, we had a different format, and this time will be a more formal lecture style. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Sarah Wassberg Johnson. She is the food historian, author, speaker, educator, podcaster, and blogger on all things related to food history. She's been featured on each season of the History Channel's Food That Built America, as well as on NPR, The Atlantic, CNN, Atlas Obscura, and more. She is published in New York History Journal and the Agricultural History Journal, and is working on her book, Preserve or Perish: Food in New York State During the Great War, 1916 to 1919, under contract with SUNY Press. Sarah received her Master's of Arts in History/Public History from the University of Albany, State University of New York, and has worked in the history museum field since 2007. So without further ado, let me turn it over to your second Sarah of the day.
Thank you so much, other Sarah. Welcome, everybody. I'm really glad to be here. Just give me 1 second while I share my PowerPoint here. There we go. So this is a really fun topic to talk about, especially in summertime. So we're going to be talking today about the history of gelatin. So the title of the talk is Dainty Desserts for Dainty People, Feminization of Gelatin. So there's a lot of really interesting history in gelatin surrounding women and how we view women and feminine things. So it's a really fun talk. I'm going to try and keep it under an hour. So if I'm going a little fast, I apologize, but we got a lot of stuff to get through. So I hope you enjoy. So first I thought we'd talk about the origin of the word. So in 1713 is the first reference to gelatin from the French gelatine, right, which is a clear jelly-like substance from animals or fish broth, from the Italian gelatina, from gelata, meaning jelly, from gelare, to gel, right, from Latin gelare, to freeze or congeal. And the spelling of gelatin without an E dates to about 1800. Right, so that is for colloquial use only. Gelatin with an E, sorry, without the E is for scientific or pseudoscientific use only. So that's kind of where we get the word gelatin, and it is correct to spell it both with and without the E, but Americans tend to spell it without the E. Excuse me. We do have a lot of early gelatinous foods. Particularly in the European tradition. So brawn and head cheese are both made from boiling animal heads, right? And so because there's bones in there, that creates kind of a gelatin. Aspic is very popular throughout the 18th and especially into the 19th century. Again, it's more savory, but you're boiling animal bones to make kind of this, when it's cooled, it creates kind of this gelatinous texture. Blanc mange, which is an almond and milk kind of jelly. Wine jellies were very popular in the 18th and early 19th centuries. And then calves foot jelly. If you've ever read Jane Austen, you've probably encountered calves foot jelly. That is indeed made from the hooves of calves and their lower legs, right? And you're basically just making a clarified gelatin. There are historic gelatin alternatives, which you do see in use today in vegetarian and vegan cuisines. Not isinglass, however. Isinglass is from the float bladders of fish. You might see historic references to it used to preserve eggs. It is also used a lot in the wine industry to clarify wine, even today. You have Irish moss, aka carrageenan, which is a thickener that is used industrially a lot today in a lot of foods, including ice cream. Agar is another one. Rennet, also not vegetarian. Rennet is an enzyme from the stomach of calves. It helps them digest milk. There are commercial versions available today that are not coming from calves' stomachs, but that is a historical one. It's most often used in the cheese industry. And then we get to the 19th century, right? That's kind of our gelatinous foods overview until we get to the 19th century when we start to have our industrial revolution, right? So one of the earliest uses of animal bones commercially was to make glue. And as we're urbanizing, we're starting to get more and more people in regions that are not growing the bulk of their own food. So there starts to be a market, more of a market for commercial food production. We also get the development in the late 18th and early 19th century of early food science. So we have, in the Enlightenment period, we have scientists who are starting to do research into the chemistry of food. And that leads us to the accidental discovery of commercial gelatin, the accidental discovery. So this is Peter Cooper, who was a scientist in the first half of the 19th century, largely. He grew up in New York and the Hudson Valley. He's kind of a jack of all trades as a scientist. He's also an abolitionist. And he gets involved in a glue and isinglass factory. So they're processing animal bones and fish into glue and isinglass. He's also involved in the development of the Tom-Thumb locomotive, just as an aside, and the laying of the transatlantic cable, and he founded Cooper Union. So he was kind of this jack of all trades who's doing all kinds of stuff. But what we're going to talk about today is his discovery of gelatin. So he is trying to figure out a better way to make glue, right? And he accidentally ends up inventing powdered gelatin in 1845. So this is one of his advertisements for Cooper's clarified gelatin. And that is his wife there. And she's the one who really figures out that, hey, this has food applications. To create a clarified, flavorless gelatin was very time consuming, very laborious, very smelly job. You had to start with animal bones and hooves. You had to boil them, which is not very nice. You end up with this kind of whiffy gelatinous soup that you then have to clarify, strain to try and get all of that meat flavor out of it so that it can be used in things like wine jellies, blanc mange. You can see on the list there's Charlotte Russe, like all of these fancy kind of French desserts. So historically, those desserts were really the purview of the wealthy, but the development of industrial powdered gelatin makes it more accessible to the middle classes and lower classes. Once powdered gelatin is developed, other people kind of figure out how to make it too, and you get the development of Knox Gelatin, which is in Johnstown, New York. And they published in 1896 this little cookbook called Dainty Desserts for Dainty People. And this is kind of our first clue about the feminization of gelatin, and also kind of where I got the title for this talk. Knox Gelatin is such a fascinating story. Charles dies in 1908, and his wife Rose becomes the CEO of the company, and she is just this amazing, fascinating person. She is very concerned with her workers. So by 1913, they have a 5-day work week, which is not typical for factory industrial applications. She gives them 2 weeks paid vacation, and they have sick leave, which is kind of unheard of. So she's sort of this very benevolent CEO who really cares a lot about her workers. She starts buying up the gelatin manufacturers, so she's not just making and marketing her own gelatin, she starts consolidating. And then in 1917, she starts marketing slightly differently to the general public, particularly as we're getting into World War I and people are more interested in like thrift and things like that. She becomes the first female director of the American Grocery Manufacturers Association in 1929, which is kind of great. And she's just an all-around amazing person to know. These are some of the desserts from this cookbook. This cookbook is from my personal collection. I thought I'd just share some of the recipes, in part because the recipes are interesting and also because there are these beautiful illustrations of the desserts. So you can see on this little page of this cookbook, we've got these very 18th century looking people at the top with their cold desserts. This is a time period, late 19th century. There's sort of a colonial revival and interest in 18th century things. 18th century fancy dress becomes very popular for costume balls and things like that. But wine jellies and blanc mange and Bavarian cream and things like that, those were all popular in the 18th century among the ultra wealthy. And here she is, Mrs. Knox, Rose Knox, is making these things more accessible to ordinary people through the use of Knox gelatin. This is an interesting one, and you saw maybe on the previous dainty desserts for dainty people. There's this interesting use of Black children in some of the early advertisements, especially this one. And you have these 2 little cherubic children, one black and one white. And it's not really clear why they're doing that. I think it's because they're trying to address a wider audience. Part of it is also that's the style for this time period. These cute little cherubic cupid children. But I just thought that was a interesting thing. That really stops pretty soon after Charles dies and Rose takes over. This is just another fun little thing. She is profiled in the 1920 Green Book magazine, which is an African-American publication. And so she's profiled as the gelatin woman, right? And her labor practices are kind of highlighted. And then this is an example of one of the Mrs. Knox Says advertisements. So they're calling for a use of gelatin in like this cherry sponge dessert, right? And using preserved fruits. So kind of an easier way for people that you've got home canned foods. Here's a way you can turn home canned fruits into a dessert. It's me. All right, we do have a competitor for Knox Gelatin, right? Which is the development of Jell-O. Pearl Bixby Waite, which is a man in Leroy, New York, is kind of the first to combine granulated gelatin with sugar flavor coloring so that you don't have to add those things. Knox Gelatin is just plain unflavored granulated gelatin. Jell-O is granulated gelatin that has had sugar and flavor and coloring added. He tries to sell his invention door to door. It's not doing super great. So he basically sells Jell-O to a neighbor. And that neighbor is Orator Francis Woodward, who knows that this product has potential. And he had tried to invent some other things. Graino is like a grain coffee substitute. He also goes door to door, but he spends a ton of money in advertising, and that is really what kind of makes Jell-O a household name. They started with a couple of flavors. In 1930, they introduced lime Jell-O, which is used extensively in like more savory salad applications. In the 1960s, they do add actual savory salad flavors because gelatin salad is becoming a thing, which we'll get to later. And then by 1974, the Jell-O Jigglers campaign really kind of reinvigorates gelatin and Jell-O in the public eye. So Jell-O really has benefited from very strong advertising campaign as part of its popularity, and it's so easy. I love this little image. This is a delivery guy has a box of Jell-O has fallen out of his delivery wagon onto the train tracks, and there's a train coming, and so he has to run to save the Jell-O. That's how important and popular. They also use the very popular Kewpies in their Jell-O advertisements, and this particular one is from a children's magazine called St. Nicholas. So they are really marketing Jell-O both not only to housewives, but also to children as like this tasty, easy dessert, right? More beautiful illustrations from a period gelatin cookbook, another one from my collection. And I just love how they make the gelatin look clear, because that is, you know, nowadays we don't think that that's that big of a deal, right? But in the period, having a clear jelly was something that was considered in the 19th century very difficult to do. So it has this kind of high status, and I love that they portrayed that in their illustration. Just another fun one, but it's showing the different flavors that are on offer. So they have lemon, orange, strawberry, cherry, and I believe that is black raspberry. A little bit later, we're getting into the 1950s here with these advertisements. You can see the prevalence of both sweet and savory salads, which a lot of people struggle with, the use of sugary Jell-O in savory salads, but that was very popular in the mid 20th century. And then we have a couple of other kind of gelatin companies that I'm going to talk about. Christian Hansen Laboratories is not technically gelatin, but it is a gelatinous dessert. Christian Hansen Laboratories is founded in Denmark. And in 1877, a man named Johann Frederickson emigrates to the US and opens a branch. And then the plant moves to Little Falls, New York in 1882. So Little Falls, Johnstown, and oh gosh, I forget where Jell-O is from, Leroy, are all in the Erie Canal corridor. And I haven't done in-depth research into why they're on the Erie Canal corridor, but I think it has something to do with the prevalence of dairy production in the Mohawk Valley. And so there's this ample access to calves, hooves, and bones through the veal and dairy industry. That's my theory. In 1886, they invent Hansen's household tablet, which is Junket, right? It's that rennet enzyme, again, from cow stomachs, again, a byproduct of the veal and dairy industry. And they're using it to make desserts. They also use the term dainty. I don't know if they're, if they did it first or if Knox Gelatin did it first, but dainty delicacies for artistic desserts, right, in 1897. And in 1911, they invent NASNA, which is Hansen backwards, which is, they later changed the name to Junket powder. So instead of using these tablets of Junket or rennet that you have to dissolve, they take a page from Knox and Jell-O and develop their Junket into a powder. So here they are. They get their start really in the cheese industry. So this is from, I believe this is their Little Falls plant. But they are also making it for individual household use. So they get involved in desserts and things like that. They also get involved in making ice cream powder and ice creams. So again, beautiful illustrations in these cookbooks, which I love. Another early company is Plymouth Rock Gelatin. And their gelatin is phosphated. It's based in Boston, Massachusetts. Again, they're using the term dainty, dainties and household helps, published probably around 1910. The cookbook is not dated. This again from my personal collection. Their patent expired in 1985, so that company is not really around anymore. But again, they are showing how to use the, yes, no lemons required. So phosphated gelatin already has the acid included, which Jell-O does as well. And then just some more beautiful advertisements about all the different things you can do with gelatin, including asparagus mousseline and mint jelly and tomato jelly salad, and jellied relish, which is maybe not how most of us would like to eat our gelatin today. Royal Gelatin is another early one, kind of an offshoot of the Royal Baking Company, Royal Baking Powder Company, excuse me. And so sometime before 1929, Royal Gelatin is founded. Not super clear when they start. And then in 1929, Royal Baking Powder merges with Fleischmann's yeast. But they continue to produce Royal Gelatin throughout the early 20th century. And they really are, you know, we have Plymouth Rock, but they really are, Royal Gelatin really is the main competitor to Jell-O, because again, it's got the flavor and the sugar and the color all together, unlike Knox, which is just the plain unflavored gelatin. Royal Gelatin is still around. It is now owned by Mondelez, but you don't see it that often because Jell-O has taken over the gelatin industry. More beautiful illustrations for all the different kinds of fancy desserts that you can make. And then this is an advertisement, I believe from the 1970s, when they introduced the blackberry flavor, which I don't think is still around, and I totally wish it was, because that sounds delicious. So why is gelatin so popular? You have all of these companies proliferating, thriving. They're publishing all of these cookbooks, beautifully illustrated, so they're not inexpensive cookbooks. But what's going on with gelatin? And we said we're going to talk about the feminization of gelatin, so that's what we're going to do. In the late 19th and early 20th century, women, particularly middle and upper class women, not super upper class women, but middle and upper class women, were very involved in the temperance movement. So there was this real backlash against alcohol and this interest in finding kind of feminizing public spaces to bring women's moral influence into the public sphere, right? Whether or not you agree with that's what really happened, or that women are more moral than men, that was the idea at the time. And the prohibition of alcohol plays a big role in that. So you have the prevalence, the proliferation, I should say, at the turn of the 20th century of soda fountains and tea rooms. In particular, tea rooms as these kind of women-only spaces. Prior to that, women largely did not eat in public. There were restaurants. They were almost exclusively patronized by men. Working class women, particularly in pink-collar jobs, would sometimes patronize, like little delis and cafes and stuff, but largely they're eating in boarding houses. And there aren't that many women working in pink collar like retail jobs prior to the late 19th century, where they're not business owners, right? They're doing wage labor. Wage labor for young women in retail and clerical settings really starts in the late 19th century, particularly in urban areas. So you have the development of tea rooms, you have the development of soda fountains as places that are safe for women and young people to interact in a place that is devoid of alcohol and devoid of, cigar smoke and things that are more typically associated with men's clubs and men's restaurants. You also get the rise of ladies who lunch. right? So upper middle class and wealthy women who are going out shopping and they're going to spend the day out and about spending money. And so they meet in a tea room or, a little uh, department store cafeteria, a soda fountain, and they're going out and having a place to rest, getting a lunch. It becomes kind of a thing. And so these places start catering to the tastes of middle and upper class, primarily white women. Women's organizations also are influencing the development of these kind of dainty foods. So you have women's clubs, women's charitable organizations, they're arranging luncheons, they're meeting in women's homes, and you need to provide food and tea or coffee. And that really starts to shift the types of foods that people are making, because you want to show off to your peers, right? And there are no men present, so you don't need to cater to men's perceived appetites and food needs. You also get people who are hosting teas and parties and luncheons more socially. So you get the rise of bridge parties, right? You get the rise of people who are just hosting teas for holidays, not necessarily attached to women's organizations. This is an example of a turn of the 20th tea room. You can see it's got like these federal style tables, and the column is very colonial revival federal style, and it's huge, right? This is not a small tea room. This is Marshall Fields. They're expecting hundreds of women to eat there throughout the day. And you can see that the tables are quite intimate. You're not expecting, 40 people for a tea or 20 or 15 people, whatever, for a bridge party. You're going out with one friend or a couple of friends, right? So it's more intimate. I love this advertisement from Knox Gelatin. It says, whenever the club meets, the problem of what to have for refreshments is very easily and satisfactorily solved by Knox Gelatin. So they give a recipe and then they say, hey, you can write and get this free recipe book. And I love this image. So here's this very, kind of not quite Gibson girl. We're a little bit past the Gibson girl period, but this very beautifully dressed woman, and she is setting out a little buffet of these are coffee cups, and then she has a couple of gelatin desserts and like a cake, right? We also get kitchen technology, and the changing kitchen are influencing what kinds of foods people are making. So we have the development of refrigerators, like this beautiful Frigidaire one from Ladies Home Journal in 1925. So you do have ice boxes previously, right? That's literally a box with a giant hunk of ice in the top that can keep things cool. And luckily, gelatin will set at or close to room temperature, but it does set much more quickly and more firmly in a chilled environment. And so you have the development of electric refrigeration starting in the 1920s. Really initially accessible only to the very wealthy in the 19-teens. But then as you get electricity proliferating throughout urban areas and people are, the roaring 20s, people have more available income and credit is very easy to get. You have the proliferation of electric appliances in the household as well. The really big thing in the turn of the 20th century that all the middle and upper class ladies are complaining about is the servant problem, right? So this is the thing that's happening in the turn of the 20th century is because fewer and fewer people are going into household service because there are more and better options for wage work. People who previously relied on household service are having to figure out how to do stuff themselves, and they're not super happy about it. And so food technology and food companies step in and offer up these convenience alternatives, right? We don't have a ton of convenience food in the 19th century, canned food being the biggest one, and things like, crackers, packaged crackers and cookies and things like that. But we don't have a ton of convenience food for most of the 19th century because if you had the means, you either enslaved someone to do the majority of that work for you, or you had paid household staff. So even, very middle class families had at least one paid household staff member to do the bulk of the very difficult labor. But that's changing in the 19th century because those people have other options where they can get better wages for fewer hours, right? So these companies are stepping in with these convenience foods like gelatin. People are doing more casual entertaining more frequently. So previously, where maybe you would have a dinner party once, a month tops, or your family would be coming to stay with you, you'd be entertaining your family. More and more, you are entertaining larger numbers of people more casually in the home. So you don't need a big fancy dinner party with multiple courses and servants to serve them. You can have people over for lunch. You can have people over for, after opera suppers, things like that, bridge parties, birthday parties, whatever. It's a little more casual, but more of the labor is put upon the lady of the house. You do also have in this time period the connection between gelatin and health. So junket is considered very easy to digest. That is, a rennet thickened milk and usually sweetener dessert. Milk is also considered one of the most healthful foods by the leading nutrition scientists and researchers of the day. In a century, milk is considered the perfect food because it contains protein, sugar, so carbohydrates, protein, and fat, right? And those were really their first big discoveries in nutrition science, not just the chemistry of food, but what people need in order to live their best lives nutritionally. So that was the conventional wisdom. We had discovered fat, protein, and carbohydrates, sugar. We knew that people needed all of those things to survive. They are all in one package in cow's milk. Children especially were seen to need milk and easily digestible things to be healthy. If you know anything about children's food in the 19th century, it's a lot of porridge and like beef tea and weak tea and milky things. Not a lot of vegetables, except for maybe like prunes or prune whip, right? So they can have some relatively easily digestible fiber, because we knew fiber was important. We just didn't think that it had any real nutritional value. And so gelatin really becomes a part of children's health as well, as a way to get them to eat more fruit and also to drink more milk. Gelatin contains both protein and collagen. So a lot of times it's considered a protein alternative for particularly children and people who are sick, which we'll get to. And so for that reason, it's also considered an invalid food and a food of the elderly, right? Before we have widespread use of dentistry, if your teeth are hurting, you don't want to chew anything. And so particularly if you're doing a savory gelatin, that is a way for you to get some protein in a way that's not going to hurt your teeth. It's also easier to digest than meat, right? Or it's considered easier to digest than meat. So it's considered an appropriate food for people who are ill. This one is from the Junket cookbook, and it's talking about why children should eat junket, right? Part of it is an advertisement, but part of it is also talking about the nutrition science of the day. And they have this little weight table, right? So here for the first time, we're kind of applying statistics and population statistics to people's health. So women are getting kind of bombarded with all this information about where should your kid be at a certain year, right? And for their height and all kinds of stuff. So this is nutrition science and medical science kind of being brought into the household in a way that had not been done previously. This is just another beautiful little advertisement of two little boys who are very happy to see gelatin. I don't think that's their mother. I think it's supposed to be a maid. It could be their mother. But here's Jell-O specifically advertising to children should be eating gelatin. And then this is for the invalid and convalescents tray. So, you know, part of the reason why gelatin was so popular was because it's colorful, right? It is visually appealing, and you can see, from these illustrations, they're trying to make it visually appealing for people who are sick, who you're trying to convince to eat. And we do have a savory one, the jellied chicken bouillon. We also have wine jelly, which wine was considered sometimes helpful for people who are ill, kind of contravening our temperance thing here. But again, the medicinal taught, right? That's part of that as well. And then Knox Gelatin is recommending gelatin for sick people as late as the 1960s, right? This is from the 1950s or 60s, which I just find very interesting. We also have Jell-O becomes pretty gendered, right? All of these women's club luncheons and stuff where we're having very sweet things. I didn't mention this earlier, but sugar is really one of the things that replaces alcohol in the temperance movement. It's not considered bad for you in the early 20th century, really, until we're getting to post-World War II. Is when we start to understand that sugar, ample supplies of refined white sugar, are not necessarily the best for us. Prior to that, it's considered something that's going to give you energy. And so gelatin, all these kind of like frou-frou little salads and desserts and stuff is considered, starts to take on this very feminine meaning, because that's who is largely eating it. But there is also this shift to try to get men to like gelatin. Who likes Jell-O? The average man, he who turns up his nose at blanc mange and floating island style of dessert, though he generally finds pie and cottage pudding heavy and indigestible, who is generally concerned by his fair companion to be so contrary that he only wants anything that does not agree with him, who refuses the charge by his liking, for Jell-O. Right? So this is, frustrated housewives who just can't get their husbands to eat properly should try Jell-O, according to Jell-O. Right? There's also this concern in the turn of the 20th century with digestion and constipation and indigestion and dyspepsia, in part because people are not eating a lot of fiber and are eating a lot of fat and refined carbs and meat. And in part because the foods that they're eating are not always the freshest, right? Particularly if you're making a roast on Sunday and then making it last until Saturday in an icebox, right? So Jell-O, because it's considered so digestible, is being touted as this appropriate dessert for men because it's sweet and jelly and not too frou-frou-y, right? Unlike floating islands and blanc mange, even though you use gelatin to make blanc mange. Jell-O is trying to horn in on not only marketing to women, but also marketing to men. Here's one from Royal Gelatin. Here's one that hungry husbands like and finicky children thrive on, right? So they're trying to say it's not just for women, which tells you in society that it really was associated with women. I like this one. This one's from 1952. And so here's a man in his apron with a mixer and a bowl and eggs, and he's maybe trying to figure out how to make a cake, and he can't. So guess what? Jell-O is really easy to make. So easy, even men can do it, right? That's the implication of this advertisement. You also get gelatin and associations with beauty, particularly starting in the post-World War II period, right? So we start to have our concepts of beauty and thinness start to change in the progressive era, right? With the tall, willowy, kind of athletic Gibson girl through to the very boyish figure of the 1920s, the 1930s. Figure is also very thin. 1940s figure is thin, kind of by necessity, thanks to rationing in World War II. 1950s, all of a sudden we can have as much butter and white bread and beef and sugar as we want because it's not rationed anymore. And so people start to struggle with their weight. And gelatin is kind of touted as weight loss alternative. It does have protein. 1925, Jell-O creates D-Zerta, which is an artificially sweetened Jell-O. And that's touted as a weight loss alternative. So instead of having cake or ice cream or pie for dessert, you can eat this artificially sweetened Jell-O and it'll taste good and it'll have some protein, so you won't be instantly hungry, but it doesn't have that many calories, right? The collagen in Jell-O was also touted as a beautifier for both nails and hair. So particularly if a woman is not eating a very high protein diet, which was common in the 20th century, they're saying that by eating Jell-O, you can get the collagen necessary to have strong nails and beautiful hair. So this is in 1956. They're still making D-Zerta. 1956, this is a new version of it. And it's associated with Weight Watchers, which I find very interesting. This one is from Knox, special diet books, right? So talking about how to use gelatin to reduce your calorie intake. And then also they have this one, a little cookbooklet or a little app, how Knox gelatin is going to make your nails better. This one is you use Knox gelatin to make a drink, right? So it's something that's they're trying to do either meal replacement or to keep you full, more full, so you eat less. And then this one from 1966 is very focused on the nails. And again, it's a beverage, a gelatin-based beverage for your nails. So how does Jell-O change from this kind of ultra wealthy food to a more accessible, industrialized, but still upper middle and middle class food way to something that is typically associated with poverty today? So in the 1970s, there's a decline in popularity of Jell-O. You do have Jell-O Jigglers, the advertising campaign in 1974, but that is marketed almost exclusively to children. You have the rise of the use of plain red gelatin in hospital foods, in hospital cafeterias, and in school cafeterias, which kind of dims its association with, fancy desserts. And it's very inexpensive, right? It is not an expensive dessert. It is probably one of the cheapest desserts that people can make. So even though you have the rise of things like box cake mix, box brownie mix, no bake desserts, things like that, just plain gelatin is still one of the cheapest things that you can make. Here's our favorite / least favorite advertiser for Jell-O Jigglers, like Bill Cosby at the height of his career takes on Jell-O advertising, and again, largely directed toward children, right? There's always room for Jell-O. Cute little girl with the Jell-O jiggler. So today, gelatin is kind of having a little bit of a resurgence. I didn't have a slide in this, but there is in the foodie world kind of a resurgence of plain gelatin being made into these Jell-O molds, right? Which get to be very popular. So whether or not Jell-O makes a national resurgence remains to be seen, but that was our Jell-O overview. So Sarah, do we have any questions? And how did I do on time? Oh, not too bad on time.
You are doing great on time, and some questions and comments. So one comment was, I remember receiving small limited page recipe booklets in my home economics class in 1963 that were published by Knox. So even in 1963, it looks like they were in the schools. And then we also have someone who loved this presentation. Thank you. I used my Jell-O mold for a punch bowl ring or ice ring, but a Bavarian chocolate cream sounds wonderful. She commented on that in your recipe book.
Yes, and I did actually try, I did a little video for the first time I did this talk, I tried making a strawberry Bavarian cream from the Knox recipe, but it only called for half an envelope.
Hmm.
And I looked up in the envelope, sizes are the same, and it did not turn out. It did not
Okay,
realize
well,
that. So just keep that in mind when you're dealing with historical recipes. If it feels like it's probably not enough gelatin, you can always add more.
yeah, that's true. Donna says that when she was a child in the 1960s, she enjoyed Junket, which my mother thought was a healthful food. Now I know why. Is Junket still available?
It is, yes. It was purchased in I think like 2018. So Christian Hansen Laboratories, I think, got bought up by who? Oh gosh, the tea. I think it's the Roses Tea Company. I forget the overarching brand. And then that brand got bought up by a larger brand and they stopped producing Junket. But a family company that loved it so much bought it out, I think, in 2018. And I think it is still produced. It's hard to find, but you can find it. Christian Hansen Laboratories also produced Danish dessert. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of that. I actually have a box of it in my cupboard that my mom found for me, and I haven't brought myself to making it. It's probably not going to be more. I got it a while ago. But that is like a raspberry kind of a gel similar thing, but it's made by Christian Hansen Laboratories. So the Junket people.
So there's hope. You might be able to find it somewhere.
Yeah, if you look on the internet, I'm sure I'll be able to find it.
Beverly says that Midwestern mom celebrates, quote, Minnesota salads that aren't really salads, and they include Jell-O.
I love Amber, the Midwestern mom. I'm originally from Fargo, North Dakota, so I definitely grew up eating a lot of Jell-O-based salads that weren't necessarily gelatin, right? There's a lot of Midwestern salads that just use the Jell-O powder, or you're making like a pudding version. And I love the Minnesota salads that aren't really salads because everybody always complains that's a really salad, but the phrase salad just means a composed dish of things that are served cold, right? It doesn't, the leafy greens is a very 20th century definition of salad. So
Gail's comment is that her favorite is slash was rainbow Jell-O, which takes about 5 hours to make, but is worth it, she says.
yeah, that's, the Jell-O molds, rainbow is probably the most labor intensive of all of them. But those fancy molds, especially if you're adding whipped cream or anything, or you're using Knox gelatin, which is not pre-sweetened and pre-flavored, they are more labor intensive than you would think. So definitely that they were kind of a show-off dish for a long time.
Beverly commented, and I don't know the jingle, so I'm probably going to get it wrong, but she says the jingle went Junket, rennet, custard, the growing up dessert. So I guess it was.
Yeah, so very marketed towards like children and children's health. Yeah, definitely milk-based foods were associated with children and children's health. I mean, they still are to a certain extent, but so during the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, like ice cream was considered a more healthful dessert, particularly for children, than things like cake and pie because it had protein. It's not a lot of protein, but they're like, if you're going to make a choice, choose ice cream, right? So similar things with Junket and Jell-O.
Yeah, the jingle I know is Jello, and that's the one I know.
I might stuck
Trisha, yeah, Trisha says she's an Oregonian with Midwestern great grandparents, so they ate Jell-O fruit salads at all family reunions. And we keep talking. Robin says we keep talking about creating a vegan 7-Up salad for my husband's vegan brother with agar. Now she's inspired to actually do it, so she's gonna.
Yes, just be aware that agar will set looser than Jell-O. So you might have to use it, particularly if you are not using a recipe that was developed specifically for agar, and you might have to use more of it than you would powdered gelatin.
Oh, that's good advice.
Yeah.
Susan asks, her grandfather worked for the Jell-O company in Phoenix, Arizona. Have you heard of them? And
I
it's JELL-WELL.
I will have to look them up. I did not come across them in my travels, but that's another one to investigate.
Yeah. And then Lisa asks or says she didn't notice panna cotta being mentioned, which is so often served in restaurants and appears to be fancy. Do you have a comment on panna cotta?
Yeah, so panna cotta is Italian, right? And so that that is a more recent introduction into kind of everyday American food ways. It is often used in restaurants. It does use plain gelatin, right, as a thickener. But because I'm talking about, you know, ordinary everyday people cooking, people were not cooking panna cotta in their households for most of the 20th century. That is mostly a restaurant food, although it doesn't have to be. It's not really any more difficult to make than
Yeah,
like the
Lisa says
very
it's fairly easy.
yeah, it's not hard to make, which is why it's a favorite of restaurants because a lot of modern restaurants don't have pastry chefs. I don't know if we were talking about this last night. Actually, we went to a very nice restaurant, and we had we got dessert. We splurged, and my friend got creme brulee. I got chocolate lava cake, basically, and my husband got cheesecake. And we're like, oh, they don't have a pastry chef because those are all very easy foods to make, and panna cotta is another one that's very easy to make. So yeah, but that is Italian, and that is a more recent import into kind of everyday life in America. So
A comment that Lori is making, she says she loves seeing the advertisements that suggest that your refrigerator leftovers could be used in a catch-all Jell-O salad. She sends them to her son, and he is in shock.
I did not even get into savory salads, gelatin salads. That could be like a whole separate presentation. But definitely that is a real shift in American foodways that modern Americans tend to not like savory gelatinous things. We tend to not like aspic. Yeah, a lot of people have problems with like head cheese and brawn. There's a lot of savory gelatinous things in a lot of different Asian cuisines that a lot of people struggle with. And I just think that is a fascinating shift because it is a very recent shift, you know, into the 1950s and 60s and even the 70s. People were regularly eating savory gelatin and savory salads and gelatins. And outside of fine dining, we don't really do that anymore, which I just think is so fascinating. I don't really know why that is, but it is a very interesting shift to me.
So when would you say that shift is? The 60s?
I think it's what I think it is children of the 50s and 60s. So the boomer generation has, for whatever reason, a very negative reaction to these foods. And maybe it's because that generation grew up in a time of relative plenty and also when their food it's like there's a more focus in food science and industrialized food on really be like sciencing the taste of food. So previous generations, a lot of time food was food, and it's more a survival thing than it is. You know, you're not only going to eat food that tastes delicious all the time. And I think post-war, that young generation didn't really grow up with the same privations as or struggles as previous generations, where you can't waste this food because otherwise we're not going to have enough food to eat, or you're going to eat what's on the table because that's all we have. They have much more choice, and so they're more focused on how things taste as opposed to showing off how things look, which is what a lot of gelatin cuisine is about. Or, you know, saving that food and repurposing it so you're not wasting things, which is the thing about using up your leftovers, right, in a new and different way. So I think that's really kids who are growing up in the 1950s and 60s who have much more choice and have much more stability and wealth are kind of rejecting those other things. And by the time we get to the 70s and 80s, You know, you have a lot more women working outside the home. And so you don't have time to be mincing up leftover chicken and chopping up cabbage and cottage cheese and putting it in Jell-O overnight. You know, they'd rather just make a microwave dinner or a TV dinner or go get fast food or whatever, you know. So more women working outside the home means you have less labor to be doing those kind of things. And so I think that's part of it, but I think also a lot of it doesn't taste super great. And we're very interested in things tasting good in this day and age. So
Absolutely. All right. For our last wrap-up question, Gretchen asked, she said, this is a fascinating presentation, and her 16-year-old daughter is interested in becoming a food historian. What would you recommend for her post-secondary education in terms of major or degree?
So I have actually a whole post on my blog called So You Want to Be a Food Historian that goes super in depth into this. But the short answer is that food historians are historians first. And food is just the lens we use to look at history, whatever time period you're interested in, whatever, you know, culture or continent you're interested in. You really have to be a historian first. It does help if you know how to cook. I'm a self-taught cook. I was taught largely, I taught myself largely by reading vintage cookbooks and kind of absorbing and learning that way. And then also a lot of trial and error, lots of error when I first started out. So that is really helpful because it gives you the context to understand the primary sources you're reading, particularly if you are interested in culinary history, which is the history of cooking, and like food service, as opposed to food history more broadly, which is what I'm interested in, which encompasses like agriculture and labor and economics and all these kind of big picture things that are happening in society. Because that's what I'm interested in, is the big picture, but other people might be interested in a very narrow focus. So if you're interested in actually the cooking and serving of food, definitely knowing how to cook really helps you understand, because a lot of those primary sources are going to leave stuff out because they expect you to already know how to cook, right? But yeah, I think find a history program that you really like, find an advisor who you respect. You don't have to go to graduate school for food history. It does help, but you don't have to as long as you're doing the work. And find an archive near you that you can see, you know, what kind of records they have. Because the hardest thing with with history research at all, is having to travel to find your sources. So if you can find local sources that you can use, that's all the better.
And what's the best way for them to find your blog?
So we've got it on this slide here. If you go to thefoodhistorian.com and click on blog, it's on there. If you also Google, you know, So You Want to Be a Food Historian, it'll come up. Or I can also send it to you there if you want to share it with that specific person. So, and people can always
Absolutely.
email me too if you want to email me at well, I don't have it on here. My email is Sarah with an H at thefoodhistorian.com.
Thank you so much, Sarah. We are exactly on time, so we did amazing. I
Great.
appreciate you taking the time to ask everyone's questions, and I really thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Hope everybody has a cool rest of the day.
Yes, go home and enjoy some Jell-O.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Take care.
Bye.